Before we start, let me just say, I never wanted it to go this far. You have to believe that. It wasn't about revenge. Not at first, but when you spend a lifetime in someone's shadow, you start to forget what the sun feels like. And when you finally get a chance to control the light, even for a moment, it's a hard thing to give up. So if you're here for a simple story about a family squabble, you're in the wrong place. This is the story of how I built a monster to finally get my brother to see me. The problem was, my monster was real. It was spinning across the Oklahoma plains, and my brother, the world's most famous daredevil, was driving straight into its heart. My name is Evan, and this is how I almost let my brother die. The hum in my control room is the only sound I've trusted for the past 72 hours. It's a low, steady thrum of cooling fans, server racks, and the quiet, rhythmic pulse of the ion saturation grid I'm monitoring on the main screen. The scent of stale coffee, ozone, and my own cold sweat hangs in the air. To anyone else, this room is a windowless, classified box of government-funded boredom. To me, it's the cockpit of God. On the central display, a swirling vortex of reds, purples, and an ominous, almost black core blooms over a satellite map of Caddo County, Oklahoma. It looks like a cosmic bruise, angry and impossibly vast. The national news networks are calling it supercell Idra 7. They're calling it a once-in-a-generation weather event. They interview seasoned meteorologists who use words like unprecedented, textbook perfect, and terrifying. They don't know the half of it. They see an act of nature. I see my signature. Idra 7 isn't a natural phenomenon. It's the culmination of Project Chimera, my life's work. A decade of research into atmospheric ionic stabilization, funded by a part of the government that doesn't officially exist, all for a single purpose: to create controlled localized weather systems. Not to make rain for farmers, but to build weather vaccines, small targeted storms that could be deployed to disrupt the formation of much larger catastrophic ones. At least that was the theory. The pitch. My creation, currently spinning up into what will likely be the first ever EF6 tornado, is a catastrophic success. It's like inventing a cure for the common cold that happens to be a flesh-eating virus. And I'm the only person on Earth who knows the abort sequence. A smaller screen to my right is playing a live feed. It's shaky, filmed from the dashboard of a heavily modified truck that's bucking and rattling down a dirt road. The sky outside the windshield is a sickening shade of green. Rain is lashing the glass in horizontal sheets. And behind the wheel, grinning like a madman, is my brother, Shane. Even through the pixelated stream, his charisma is infuriating. The square jaw, the 5 o'clock shadow that always looks deliberate, the way he winks at the camera mounted on his dash. He's wearing a black t-shirt with the logo of his brand, Storm Slayer, stretched tight across his chest. He's talking to his hundreds of thousands of followers, his voice a gravelly boom over the wind's roar. She is a beauty, folks. An absolute monster. The structure is divine. He gestures with one hand at the churning cloud base. The guys back at the office, the pencil pushers, they're all saying stay away. They're issuing warnings. But they don't get it. You don't get a shot at a storm like this by playing it safe. This is the big one. This is for the history books. The pencil pushers. That's me, Dr. Evan Hayes, PhD in atmospheric physics, the boring older brother who plays with computer models while his heroic younger brother dances with titans. He's always framed it that way. Ever since we were kids. He was the one climbing the tallest trees, jumping off the garage roof, getting the stitches and the stories. I was the one inside with a book, the one who built a working barometer for the 6th grade science fair, only to have Shane borrow it to see if it would float in the creek. He has no idea. He's chasing the greatest storm in history, planning to cement his legacy as the king of daredevils, and he doesn't know that the storm itself is my legacy. He's a knight charging at a dragon, utterly clueless that his own brother built the beast, controls its every breath, and holds the only sword that can slay it. A red alert flashes on my console. Mesocyclone rotation velocity has exceeded 175 miles per hour. The algorithm is screaming at me. Tornado imminent. Initiate abort sequence. Protocol Omega. I place my hand on a small separate console, a failsafe unit bolted directly to the desk. A clear cover flips up, revealing a single recessed red button. Below it is a biometric scanner. My thumbprint, and my thumbprint alone, can send the deionization pulse. A cascade of precisely timed electromagnetic waves that will destabilize the updraft, collapse the wall cloud, and shred Dra7 into nothing more than a severe thunderstorm in under 12 minutes. It would be a quiet, anticlimactic death for such a magnificent creation. Shane's voice cuts through my thoughts, laughing. Getting close to the bear's cage now. This is where the amateurs turn back. This is where the legends are made. I watch him on the screen, so confident, so arrogant, so completely and utterly unaware, the years of his condescending smirks, the how's playing with your weather crayons, Ev, comments at family dinners, the way my parents' eyes would glaze over when I tried to explain my work but would light up when Shane showed them a grainy video of a funnel cloud. It all coalesces into a single cold thought. He wants a legend. He wants the storm of a lifetime. My thumb hovers over the scanner. I could end it. Right now, just a press, and it's over. He goes home, maybe a little disappointed, but safe. He'd have a story about the monster storm that just vanished. He'd never know, but then I look back at the main screen, at my creation, the perfect terrifying symmetry of the hook, echo, the raw beautiful power I unleashed. He called my work boring. He called me a pencil pusher. He's about to find out what a pencil pusher can do. I pull my hand back from the abort panel. A new icon appears on Shane's live feed map, a little tornado symbol. It's touched down. On the screen, Shane lets out a whoop of pure ecstasy. We have contact. We have touchdown. It's here, people. It's really here. And in the quiet of my control room, 1,000 miles away, I lean forward and whisper to the screen, "Yes, it is, brother. I made it just for you." The minutes after the touchdown felt like hours. The hum of the servers seemed to get louder, amplifying the frantic beating in my own chest. My creation was alive, a physical entity tearing through the Oklahoma soil. On one screen, I had the cold hard data, wind shear velocity, debris signature, the probability cone of its path. On the other, I had the human element, my brother, a tiny insignificant man in a metal box, cheering as the apocalypse descended. His stream was a chaotic mess of adrenaline and shaking camera work. Look at the motion. The inflow is incredible. I've never seen anything like it. He was a connoisseur admiring a fine wine, completely oblivious that the vintage was poison, and I was the vintner. My fingers twitched, itching to go back to the abort panel. This was insane. I was risking lives. A town, an entire community was in the path of this thing, but my models were precise. I had guided the initial formation to a sparsely populated region, the projected track, for the next 45 minutes at least, crossed nothing but empty farmland. I had built in that buffer. I had planned for this. I told myself it was a contingency, a safety measure, but a dark, honest part of my soul knew the truth. I had given myself time to watch, time for him to get close, time for him to be humbled. A memory, sharp and unwelcome, sliced through the tension. I was 10 years old, the county science fair. I had spent 2 months building a miniature tornado vortex in a 2-liter bottle, with dry ice and a small fan. It was my pride and joy. I explained the principles of convective updrafts and cyclonic rotation to the judges, my voice reedy but confident. Then came Shane, who was 12. He didn't have a project. He just sauntered over, looked at my little vortex and laughed. He told everyone I'd just put smoke in a bottle. Later, while I was getting a ribbon, a measly 3rd place, he and his friends took my project behind the bleachers. They hooked the fan up to a massive battery they'd stolen from a golf cart. The fan whirred to a terrifying speed, the bottle buckled, and then it exploded, spraying everyone with water and shards of plastic. Shane was the hero, saving everyone from my dangerous experiment. He got a bloody nose from a piece of flying debris, and milked it for a week. My parents told me I should have been more careful. They told me I needed to be less intense, more like Shane. The memory was so vivid I could almost smell the cheap pine of the gymnasium floor. That was the moment the seed was planted. The world didn't reward the person who understood the storm, it rewarded the one who made the most noise while standing in the rain. Another alert blared on my console, snapping me back to the present. Structural intensification, vertex diameter, exceeding projections by 12%. It was growing faster than I'd anticipated. A small cold knot of fear began to form in my gut, a fear that was entirely separate from my feelings about Shane. This was my experiment. My responsibility. Was my pride blinding me to the danger? Was I becoming the reckless one? I pulled up the comms log. My direct supervisor, a stoic, no-nonsense man named Dr. Ares Thorne, had been messaging me for the past hour. Ares was the only other person who knew Project Chimera was active, though he didn't know its current terrifying scale. He thought this was a mid-level test, a controlled burn. Ares Evan, the energy readings are off the charts. What's your status? Ares, the ion saturation levels are 200% above projected maximums. Is this a sensor error? Ares Evan, respond. The DoD liaison is starting to ask questions we can't answer. They're seeing this on the national radar. I ignored them. Ares was a good man, a brilliant scientist who'd been my mentor. He believed in the project's potential to save lives. He'd shielded me from the bureaucratic nonsense and the military brass who wanted to weaponize our research. He trusted me, and I was betraying that trust with every second I let this thing live. Why? The question echoed in the silent room. Why was I doing this? Because of Christmas 2 years ago, that's why. It was the first Christmas since our mother had passed away. Dad was adrift, and the holiday felt fragile, hollow. I had flown home, taking a precious week off from the project. I'd spent a small fortune on a gift for him, a high-end computerized telescope. Since Mom died, he'd started talking about the stars, about the things that were bigger than us. I thought it would be a new hobby for him, something for us to do together. I even set it up in the backyard on Christmas Eve, pointing it toward the Orion Nebula. Shane, of course, rolled in late on Christmas morning. He was hungover, loud, and full of stories about chasing a blizzard in the Rockies. He tossed a small, sloppily wrapped box at Dad. Inside was a framed 8x10 photo. It was one of Shane's, a dramatic shot of a lightning strike over a canyon. It was a good photo, I'll give him that. But it was just a copy of a picture he sold on his website for $50. Dad stared at it for a long moment. I watched his face, expecting polite appreciation. Instead, his eyes filled with tears. He stood up and hugged Shane so tightly, I thought the man's ribs would crack. He said, "This is it, son. This is her. The power, the beauty. It's like she's still here with us." He put the photograph on the center of the mantelpiece, right where Mom's picture used to be. My telescope, my $1,000 gift of connection and quiet contemplation, sat forgotten in its box on the porch. Later that day, I overheard Dad on the phone with my aunt. "Shane just gets it," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion. "He brings the thunder, Evan. Well, Evan's a good boy. He tries. The words had been a physical blow, a decade of academic excellence, a career at the bleeding edge of science, a quiet, steady life of responsibility, all of it erased by a cheap photograph. I wasn't the thunder. I was the quiet drizzle nobody notices. In that moment, sitting in my childhood home, I felt a profound tectonic shift inside me. The years of quiet resentment, of swallowing my pride, of letting the small injustices slide, it all hardened. It wasn't about getting my father's approval anymore. It was about proving that my boring science, my weather crayons, could create more thunder than Shane could ever dream of chasing. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. On Shane's live stream, the reality of the situation was starting to dawn on him. The ecstatic grin was gone, replaced by a tense line. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The tornado was no longer a majestic pillar on the horizon. It was a churning, grinding wall of debris and wind, a mile wide and growing. The sky wasn't green anymore, it was black. "Okay, wow, this is a whole new level," he muttered, his voice strained. The bravado was cracking. The RFD, the rear flank downdraft, is wrapping around hard. It's trying to cut off the road. He was talking in professional jargon now, the showman replaced by the survivalist. He was realizing this wasn't a storm he could dance with. This was a storm that could swallow him whole. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad. Dad, Evan, are you seeing this? Shane is in Oklahoma. Turn on the news. A minute later, another text. Dad, he just posted a new video. He's too close. Can you call him? Tell him what the models say. Tell him to get out of there. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. For the first time in my life, my father was asking for my professional opinion. He was turning to the pencil pusher to save the hero. He wanted my models, my data, my boring science to reign in the thunder he loved so much. This was it, the catalyst. The moment I had been subconsciously waiting for. It wasn't the blaring alarms or the messages from Eris. It was my father's text. He didn't ask me because he finally respected my work. He asked me because he was scared, and he was using me as a tool, a phone relay to his favored son. A cold, clarifying calm washed over me. The knot of fear in my stomach didn't vanish, but it solidified into something else. Resolve. My brother had chased storms his whole life, feeding on their power, their danger. He sold that danger to the world, packaged it up in t-shirts and dramatic videos. He'd built his entire identity on being the man who wasn't afraid of nature's fury. Well, I am nature's fury. I looked at the abort panel, at the red button under its plastic shield. It was my secret, my power. They thought I was the safe one, the boring one, the afterthought. They were all about to learn that the quietest people often have the most to say. And my statement was currently rewriting the landscape of Caddo County. I opened a new window on my terminal, a direct command line to the Chimera system's core programming. The abort sequence was one macro, but the system was far more complex than that. I could do more than just kill it. I could guide it. I could tweak the ion flow, adjust the thermal updraft, subtly manipulate the atmospheric pressure gradients that were its lifeblood. I could in essence steer. Shane believed he was in a cage with a wild bear. He was wrong. He was in a cage with a bear on a leash, and I was holding the leash. I typed a single line of code. It was a minor adjustment, a fractional shift in the eastern pressure wall, a nudge, barely perceptible on the grand scale, but enough to alter the tornado's projected path by a few degrees to the north, directly across the highway Shane was about to flee on. It wouldn't hit him directly. Not yet, but it would cut off his escape. It would trap him. On the screen I watched the tornado's vector shift. My heart was a cold, heavy stone in my chest. This was no longer a passive act of letting something happen. This was an active choice. A move on the chessboard. Shane saw it. His head whipped to the side, looking out his passenger window. No, 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 he breathed. His voice barely a whisper picked up by the mic. It's turning. It's not supposed to do that. The models said it would track northeast. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of the servers, a comforting chorus. I looked at his terrified face on the monitor, and for the first time in my life, I felt seen. The models have been updated, brother, I said to the empty room. My models. The decision to steer the storm was a threshold I couldn't uncross. The passive observer was gone, replaced by an active participant. My secret was no longer just a piece of knowledge, it was a weapon. And my plan, which had been a formless cloud of resentment and fantasy, began to crystallize into something sharp and deliberate. This wasn't just about humbling Shane anymore. This was about taking control of the narrative that had defined my entire life. My immediate priority was containment, not of the storm, but of information. The Department of Defense liaison, a man I knew only as Mr. Clark, would be a problem. He was a bureaucrat, a man who saw Project Chimera not as a scientific tool but as a potential asset, a line item on a budget. His ignorance was my shield. He and his superiors knew we could influence weather, but they thought in terms of cloud seeding and fog dispersal. They had no comprehension of what Hedra 7 truly was. If they found out I had created a rogue supercell, they would panic. They would shut everything down, seize my research, and bury me in a concrete bunker for the rest of my life. My one chance at vindication would be lost. This is where my colleague Eris became the key. He was my firewall. I finally answered his frantic messages, but I played the part of the overwhelmed scientist. Me, Eris, I see the readings. It's an unexpected resonance cascade. The initial ionic pulse must have hit a pocket of atmospheric instability we didn't model. It's amplifying itself. I'm trying to get it under control. It was a plausible lie, plausible enough to buy me time. The concept of a resonance cascade was just theoretical enough to sound impressive and just vague enough to be unprovable. Eris. Control, Evan, the Pentagon is lighting up my phone. They want answers. They're talking about scrambling jets to take readings. Me, no, absolutely not. Tell them any aircraft entering that airspace will be torn apart. The electromagnetic flux alone could fry their avionics. It's too dangerous. I need to stabilize the field from here. It's the only way. This was a calculated risk. I was betting that their fear would outweigh their curiosity. I was painting myself as the only man who could solve the problem, a problem they didn't know I had single-handedly created. Eris was the voice of reason, my conscience in digital form. He was a good man, caught in a terrible situation. Eris, what do you need? Tell me what to do. Me, I need you to run interfere. Keep Clark and the DoD busy, feed them my cascade theory. Emphasize the volatility, tell them I am executing stabilization protocols, but that the system is responding erratically. The most important thing is that no one touches my console, no one tries to initiate a remote shutdown. The feedback could wipe out the whole grid. Another lie, there was no remote shutdown. The only off switch was the biometric scanner under my thumb. My hidden leverage wasn't just the abort sequence itself, but the fact that I was the only one who could physically execute it. The entire multi-billion-dollar project, the careers of generals and the anxieties of senators, all came down to the ridges and whorls on my right thumb. It was the ultimate irony. They had insisted on a single point of failure security system to prevent the technology from being stolen or misused. They never imagined the single point of failure would be the system's own creator. With Eris running blocker, I turned my full attention back to the board. The plan had 3 phases. Phase 1 was complete. Trap him. By nudging the storm's path, I had cut off Shane's primary escape route along the highway. I could see it on his GPS tracker. His truck, a panicked little icon, had screeched to a halt, then done a frantic 3-point turn. He was now speeding down a network of smaller unpaved farm roads, trying to outrun the southern edge of the storm. He was playing my game now, on my board. Phase 2 was isolation. Shane's entire persona was built on being connected. His live stream, his social media, his constant contact with his Stormslayer fanbase. He was never truly alone in the storm. He always had his audience. I intended to take that away from him. The core of Hadra 7 was a maelstrom of electromagnetic energy. The same force that was powering the storm could be weaponized. It was a feature I'd built into the system for a completely different purpose, disrupting enemy communications in a combat zone. A theoretical application, of course. I focused a narrow beam of concentrated ionic energy, not on the tornado itself, but on the area directly around Shane's truck. It was delicate work, like performing surgery with a lightning bolt. On his live stream, the video began to stutter. The audio filled with static. Signal is breaking up. Shane's voice crackled. Massive interference. I've never seen EM fields this strong. Then the screen went black. A single message appeared. Stream of flying. On Twitter, his official account, likely run by an assistant back in a safe office, posted an update. We've lost Shane's signal. The storm's interference is too strong. Stand by. The comments exploded. Prayers, worries, and accusations that he'd finally gone too far. But for Shane out there on a dirt road in the dark, it would be silence. His audience was gone. His lifeline was cut. It was just him, the truck, and my storm. The final phase, phase 3, was the confrontation. But it had to be on my terms. He had to be the one to reach out. He had to be the one to ask for help, and not from a pencil pusher. He had to ask me, his brother. I knew he carried a satellite phone for emergencies, a device that wouldn't be affected by the localized EM pulse. It was his last resort. He wouldn't use it to call 911. His pride wouldn't allow it. He wouldn't call Dad and scare him more. He'd call the one person he knew who understood the language of storms. Even if he mocked that understanding, he would call me. The question was, how much pressure would it take? I returned to the command line. I didn't need to intensify the main tornado. That was too crude, too dangerous. The true artistry of the Chimera system was in its subtlety. I began to spawn smaller, ancillary vortices, sisters, we called them in the lab. They weren't full-fledged tornadoes, just powerful, transient whirlwinds. I sent one spinning across the field to his left, tearing up a line of fence posts. I sent another to his right, kicking up a rooster tail of dirt and rock that peppered the side of his truck. I was hurting him, not with brute force, but with calculated terror. I was a shepherd, guiding a lost, arrogant sheep with a pack of invisible wolves. Every time he thought he'd found an open road, a new threat would appear, forcing him to turn, to second guess, to feel the icy grip of helplessness. He was the great Shane, the storm slayer, being toyed with. The master of the chase was now the prey. A new memory surfaced. College. I was a sophomore, buried in thermodynamics textbooks, working 2 part-time jobs to cover my tuition. Shane, a freshman, was on a full-ride scholarship, which was really just our father paying for everything. One night, I got a call. It was Shane. He was at a party that had gotten out of hand. Some windows were broken. The police were there. He needed me to come down and talk to them. He said, "You're good with words, Eve. You can smooth it over." I drove an hour, spent the last $40 I had in the world to pay for the broken window, and used every ounce of my calm, rational demeanor to convince the homeowner not to press charges. Shane stood behind me, smelling of cheap beer, not saying a word. When it was over, he clapped me on the back. "Knew I could count on you, bro. You're my get-out-of-jail-free card." He never said thank you. He never paid me back. I was just a tool to be used, a function to be called upon when his charisma failed. My phone rang. The caller ID was a string of satellite numbers. I let it ring. Once, twice. On the third ring, I picked it up and put it on speaker. I didn't say anything. For a moment, there was only the sound of howling wind and the rattle of his truck. Then his voice. It was tight, ragged, stripped of all its bravado. "Evan." I still said nothing. Let him work for it. "Evan, I know you can hear me. Pick up. It's bad out here." I took a slow, deliberate breath. "The models looked pretty clear this morning." "Shane," I said, my voice perfectly level, a stark contrast to the chaos on his end of the line. "Severe, but manageable for a pro like you. The models are wrong," he yelled, his voice cracking with frustration and fear. "This thing, it's not behaving right. It's like it's intelligent. It's cutting me off. Everywhere I go, it's there. It's like it's intelligent." The words sent a thrill through me, a dark, terrible surge of pride. He saw. He finally saw. He didn't know he was talking to the intelligence he was describing. "Weather is chaotic, Shane. You know that. It's just physics. Pressure, temperature, moisture," I said, reciting the textbook platitudes he'd always mocked. "Don't give me the lecture, Evan. Not now. I'm trapped. I'm on County Road 41B, and my God, there's another one forming right in front of me." I looked at my screen. I saw the sister vortex I had just spun up, blocking the road ahead. I saw his little GPS icon, a blinking panicked dot. Phase 2 was complete. He was isolated. He was terrified. And he was calling me. The stage was set. "What do you want me to do, Shane?" I asked, my voice still unnervingly calm. "I'm 1,000 miles away, looking at a computer. You're the one in the truck. You're the storm slayer." There was a long pause, filled with the scream of the wind. I could picture him perfectly, his face pale, his eyes wide, finally understanding that his strength, his courage, was useless against a problem that required a different kind of power. When he finally spoke, his voice was a broken whisper. "Just tell me where to go. You're the one with the models. You're the smart one. Just tell me how to get out." The smart one. He had never, not once in our entire lives, called me that without a thick layer of sarcasm. But there was no sarcasm now. Only desperation. I had him. The power shift was palpable, a change in the atmospheric pressure of our entire relationship. For 3 decades he had been the sun, and I had been a planet in a distant cold orbit. Now the gravity had reversed. His survival depended on my every word. The silent takeover was complete. Now it was time to let him feel the weight of his new reality. "Stay on 41B, I said, my voice crisp and authoritative. "Head west for 2.3 miles. There's an old storm cellar on the north side of the road, part of the old Miller farm. The farmhouse is gone, but the cellar should still be intact. Can you see it?" I knew, of course, that he couldn't. The sister vortex was still blocking his view, a swirling curtain of dirt and debris. I was giving him a destination he couldn't reach, a sliver of hope behind an impassable wall. It was a test. No, I told you there's a funnel cloud on the road, he screamed into the phone. The sound of hail began to ping off his truck like gunshots. I can't go west. The vortex is unstable, I replied calmly, as if discussing a lab result. Its rotational energy is low. It will likely dissipate in the next 90 seconds. You need to be ready to move the instant it does. I watched my monitor. The sister vortex was, as I'd designed it, already losing cohesion. My statement wasn't a prediction, it was a promise. I was the narrator of his story now, telling him what was about to happen moments before it did. To him, it would seem like an impossible genius-level forecast. A miracle. How can you possibly know that? He asked, his voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. I'm not looking at the same models you are, Shane, I said. The statement was literally true. He was looking at the public-facing NOAA data. I was looking at the source code of God. The 90 seconds ticked by in silence. I could hear his ragged breathing over the phone. I imagined him, staring at the whirlwind, his hands clenched on the wheel, trusting his life to the disembodied voice of his nerdy brother. The brother he'd once locked in a closet for an entire afternoon for being annoying. Then, just as I'd said, the vortex sputtered. It unraveled like a ball of yarn, collapsing into a harmless gust of wind. The road ahead was clear. There was a stunned silence on the line. Then, a choked sound that might have been a sob. It's gone. How did you drive, Shane? I cut him off. 2.3 miles. Now, he didn't argue. The sound of his engine revving was my answer. My first move had been to trap him. This was my second to establish absolute authority. I wasn't just an advisor anymore. I was his only path to survival. The panic began to ripple outward. My father called again. I let it go to voicemail. Then my aunt, then my uncle. The family's designated hero was in trouble, and the whole network was activating. They were all watching the news, which was now showing terrifying zoomed-in helicopter shots of the main tornado. They saw the storm, but I saw the architecture. And I saw my brother, a tiny speck moving at my command. A new message from Eris popped up, flagged as urgent. Eris, Evan, Clark is losing his mind. He's threatening to invoke the Patriot Act to seize the lab. He says this isn't a weather event anymore, it's a national security threat. He's talking about trying to disrupt it with a high-altitude EMP. It would be catastrophic. It would fry our entire grid, and God knows what else. What in God's name did you do? The mention of an EMP sent a jolt of real fear through me. Clark was a fool, but he was a fool with power. An EMP burst was a sledgehammer approach to a surgical problem. It wouldn't just dissipate the storm, it would cause a feedback loop in my system that could permanently destroy it, potentially triggering a cascade of unpredictable violent weather events across the entire Midwest. It was the one thing other than my abort sequence that could truly make me lose control. I had to de-escalate the situation with the DoD, but without revealing my hand. Me, Eris. Tell Clark an EMP is the worst possible idea. The ionic field is too unstable. A sudden electromagnetic shock could cause the storm's energy to discharge downwards in a massive single pulse. It would be like a lightning strike a mile wide. Tell him it would sterilize the ground for a generation. It's a bluff, but it's a bluff rooted in physics he won't understand. Eris, sterilize the ground. Are you serious? Me, just tell him. Use those exact words. Tell him I am initiating the final stage of the stabilization protocol. Tell him to give me 30 minutes. 30 minutes. That was my new deadline. The window was closing. The game had to end. Shane's voice came back over the satellite phone. I'm here. I see it. The cellar doors are right off the road. Get out of the truck and get inside, I commanded. Leave everything. Just go. The truck, my dear, it's worth a fortune. The truck is a metal coffin, Shane. It won't exist in 5 minutes. Go, now. I heard a car door slam and the crunch of his boots on gravel. The wind was so loud now it was a physical presence on the call, a deafening roar. I pulled up the schematics for the Miller Farm cellar. It was old, built in the 1940s. Reinforced concrete, 12 feet underground. it would hold. My next move was the most dangerous yet. I was going to give him the show he'd always wanted. I was going to bring the monster right to his doorstep. With a few keystrokes, I released the constraints on the main updraft. I stopped hurting, stopped steering, and let the storm feed. The energy readings on my console went from red to a deep alarming crimson. Catastrophic intensification. The screen flashed. EF5 plus signature confirmed. The main tornado, which had been a terrifying but relatively stable pillar, began to swell. It widened, its base growing dark and thick with the houses, trees, and topsoil it was inhaling. It was transforming from a tornado into a wedge, a churning nightmare that erased the horizon. "I'm in," Shane yelled over the phone. "I'm in the cellar." "My God, Evan, the sound." "Close the doors," I said. "They're heavy." "I'm trying." A loud clang echoed, then another. "They're closed." "Oh my God, it's right on top of me." I focused the storm's path. The edge of the vortex, the most violent part, would pass directly over the cellar. He wouldn't be harmed, not in his concrete shell, but he would experience the full, undiluted fury of my creation. He would hear it. He would feel the ground shake. He would feel the air pressure drop so fast it would make his ears pop and his lungs ache. He had spent his life chasing the storm. Now the storm had caught him. For the next 3 minutes, the only sound from the phone was a low guttural roar that was so intense it distorted the microphone. It was the sound of a world being unmade. I could feel the vibrations through the phone, 1,000 miles away. I closed my eyes, picturing him down there in the dark, the daredevil, the storm slayer, reduced to a terrified child huddled in a basement. He was completely, utterly powerless, and I was the one who held all the power. The roaring slowly subsided, replaced by the sound of falling debris and his own ragged gasps. Is it over?" he whispered. "The main vortex has passed," I said. I looked at the screen. The wedge tornado was continuing on its destructive path, still my responsibility. The game was over. It was time to clean up my mess. "Stay where you are. Don't come out until I tell you." I cut the call. My hands moved to the abort panel. The plastic cover felt cool under my fingers. I flipped it up. The red button seemed to glow in the dim light of the control room. My thumb hovered over the biometric scanner. This was it, the end. But as I was about to press it, a thought, cold and sharp, stopped me. Shane was safe. The DoD was temporarily held at bay. But the lesson wasn't complete. He hadn't just needed to be humbled, he needed to understand, and so did my family. The people who had cheered for the storm chaser and ignored the storm maker. They needed to understand the power they had so casually dismissed. The silent takeover wasn't just about Shane, it was about all of them. I took my hand off the abort panel. I picked up my phone and dialed my father. He answered on the first ring, his voice a panicked mess. "Evan, thank God, is Shane okay? We lost his stream. The news is saying the tornado it's the worst they've ever seen." "He's safe, Dad," I said, my voice empty of emotion. "Oh, thank God," he sobbed with relief. "Where is he? Is he hurt?" "He's fine, but the storm isn't." I paused, letting the weight of my next words settle in the air between us. "And I need you to listen to me very carefully. Shane is safe because I made him safe. He's alive because I am allowing him to be alive." There was a confused silence. "What are you talking about, Evan? What do you mean, you allowed him?" I took a deep breath. "This storm, it's not what you think it is. It's not an act of God." I leaned forward, my eyes fixed on the beautiful, terrifying vortex on my main screen. "It's an act of me." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It was a dense, heavy vacuum, more profound than the roar of the tornado itself. I had just detonated a bomb in the middle of my family's entire belief system, and my father was at ground zero. "Evan, that's not funny," he finally stammered, his voice thin and reedy. "People are dying. You can't joke about something like this." "I've never been more serious in my life," I said, my tone flat and cold. "I want you to turn the news channel to the satellite view. Do you see the hook echo, the perfect symmetrical spiral? Natural storms have imperfections. They are chaotic. This one is not. This one is engineered. And I am the engineer." I could hear the frantic clicking of the remote control. I imagined him in his worn leather armchair, the one he always sat in, the one from which he'd dispensed a lifetime of praise for Shane and mild dismissive affection for me. I I don't understand, he said, but the panic in his voice was morphing into something else, a dawning horrified comprehension. He was a simple man in many ways, but he wasn't stupid. He knew my field of study. He knew I worked on classified government projects. The pieces were there, he just never had a reason to put them together. You don't need to understand the science, Dad. You just need to understand this. Shane is in a cellar in the middle of that storm. He is alive because I guided him there. The tornado that just passed over his head, the one that could have torn him to pieces, spared him because I commanded it to. I have absolute control over it, and I am the only one who can make it stop. This was the true power shift. It wasn't just about making Shane reliant on me. It was about forcing my father to see the world as it truly was, not as he wanted it to be. His hero, the man of action, was a helpless pawn. His other son, the boring academic, was the grand master moving the pieces. You did this, he whispered. The accusation was there, but it was buried under a thick layer of shock. You created that monster. I created a tool to save lives. I corrected him, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. It got out of control, or perhaps I let it. I left the ambiguity hanging in the air, a cruel little hook. Let him wonder. Let him debate my motives for the rest of his life. You have to stop it, Evan. My God, son, you have to turn it off. The desperation was raw, pleading. It was the voice of a father begging for his child's life. But which child? The one in the cellar, or the one with his finger on the button? For the first time he needed me. Not my money, not my quiet reliability, not my ability to clean up Shane's messes. He needed my power. I will, I said, but not yet. What do you mean, not yet? What are you waiting for? He shrieked. I'm waiting for an apology, I said, the words coming out colder than I intended. The line went dead with confusion. An apology? For what? This was the moment, the culmination of 1,000 small cuts. For the science fair, for the telescope, for telling me I try. For every time you celebrated him for being reckless while you dismissed me for being careful, for making me the family's foundation, the boring solid ground that the hero was built on, and never once acknowledging that foundations are the most important part of any structure. I was no longer just Evan, the meteorologist. I was the family's collective conscience, giving voice to years of resentment. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were a lawyer reading a list of grievances on behalf of a long-suffering client. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. And now, it was about a full and complete accounting. My father started to blubber, a pathetic mix of excuses and panicked pleas. He said it was never like that I was being too sensitive, that he loved both of us equally. The classic gaslighting, the desperate counter-manipulation of a man whose entire worldview had just been shattered. He was trying to use the old tools, the guilt, the denial, the appeals to a family unity that had only ever existed in his mind, but the tools were broken. They had no effect on me anymore. I had built a fortress of my own, and it was 1,000 miles wide, and spinning at 200 miles per hour. Save it, Dad, I said, my voice sharp. I don't want your empty words. I want Shane to say it. I want to hear it from him. I'm sending him your number. He's allowed to make one more call. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the pure, unadulterated release of a lifetime of suppressed anger. The family exodus was complete. I had severed the lines of communication, torched the bridges of obligation. They were now on an island, and I was the only one with a boat. My screen with Eris's messages lit up again. Eris, Evan, your bluff worked. Clark is backing down on the EMP, but he's getting a general on the line. He's talking about classifying this as a domestic terror event. You have minutes, not a half hour. Whatever you're doing, finish it. The window is closing. This is beyond saving Shane now. This is about saving you. Eris's loyalty, even now, was a sharp pang in my chest. He was trying to save me from myself. He was the only person in this whole mess who was acting with any semblance of honor. I had to end it. The game had gone on long enough, but I needed that final piece. The one thing I'd been denied my entire life, acknowledgement from my brother. I sent a text to the satellite phone. You can make one call to Dad. Then I'm shutting this down. I waited. 1 minute, two. I watched the storm on the monitor. It was still a monster, still carving a path of destruction, but to me it now looked tired. Its purpose was served. My personal cell phone rang. It wasn't my father. It was an unknown number. I answered it. It was Shane. He must have gotten the number from Dad. His voice was completely different. The terror was gone, replaced by a hollow, empty shell of a man. Dad told me, he said. No greeting, no preamble. He told me what you said, that it's you. It is, I replied. There was a long pause. I heard a sound like a dry heave. All this time, all my life, I've been chasing storms, and you were making them. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of dawning cosmic horror. He wasn't just bested, his entire identity was a sham. He was a gladiator who just found out the emperor he served was also the one secretly breeding the lions. I needed you to see, I said simply. See what? This, he screamed, the anger finally breaking through the shock. Destruction, ruin, is that what you wanted me to see? No, I said, and for the first time, my own voice wavered, a crack in the icy facade. I wanted you to see me. The line was silent again. The truth of that simple statement hung between us, more powerful than any tornado. It was all it ever came down to. A little boy with a science project, who just wanted his big brother to think he was cool. Okay, Shane whispered, his voice broken. Okay, Evan, I see you. You win. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't satisfying. It was just sad. He sounded like a child. I'm sorry, he choked out. For everything. Just make it stop. Please. There it was. The words I'd waited a lifetime to hear, but they didn't bring the vindication I expected. They just felt empty. The victory was hollow. I said softly. Stay in the cellar. Help will be there soon. I hung up the phone. I turned to the main console, to the beautiful, terrible monster I had made. My creation. My statement. My shame. My hand was steady now. I placed my thumb on the scanner. It beeped, recognizing me. The red button lit up, pulsing like a heartbeat. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about mercy. I pressed the button. The moment I pressed the abort button, the room felt different. The low hum of the servers changed pitch, a deep, resonant tone that vibrated through the floor. On the main screen, the change was instantaneous and breathtaking. The command I had sent wasn't just a kill switch, it was a complex, cascading sequence of deionization pulses, fired from a network of ground-based emitters I had secretly installed over the years under the guise of atmospheric sensors. The storm didn't just stop, it unraveled. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing I had ever seen. The tight, perfect spiral of the hook echo began to fray at the edges, like a rope snapping under immense tension. The mile-wide wedge tornado, the ravenous monster, seemed to shudder. Its smooth, dark surface erupted in flashes of brilliant blue and white light, the deionization pulses hitting the supersaturated air. It lost its form, its terrifying cohesion. The solid wall of debris dissolved into a chaotic, expanding cloud of dust and rain. The violent rotation slowed, then stopped, then reversed in on itself, in a few dying, pathetic gasps. In less than 10 minutes, the most powerful supercell in recorded history was gone, vanished. What was left was a sprawling, angry-looking thunderstorm, but a normal one, a natural one. The news channels were in a state of utter pandemonium. Anchors were speechless. Meteorologists were stumbling over their words, trying to find a scientific explanation for what they had just witnessed. They used phrases like catastrophic collapse, unprecedented atmospheric event, and miraculous dissipation. They would debate it for years. They would never find the answer. My confrontation with Shane was already over, a quiet, broken conversation over a satellite link. The real confrontation, the one I hadn't fully anticipated, was with the aftermath. My new reality. A series of encrypted messages flooded my terminal. It was Eris. Eris. It's gone. Evan. It's just gone. What did you do? Me. I did what I said I would. I stabilized the field. Eris. They're calling it the Oklahoma event. The general is on his way to the facility. He's coming for you, Evan. You need to have a story, a damn good one. I knew what I had to do. I initiated a full system purge, not of the raw data that was my leverage, but of my command logs. I erased every keystroke that showed me steering the storm, intensifying it, or spawning the sister vortices. I left only 2 entries, the initial accidental resonance cascade, and the final heroic stabilization protocol. The narrative I was crafting was simple: a brilliant but unlucky scientist, whose experiment went horribly wrong, but who, through sheer genius and bravery, managed to pull the world back from the brink. It was a lie, but it was a lie, wrapped in a kernel of truth. 2 hours later, 2 humorless men in dark suits flanked a man with 3 stars on his shoulder as they entered my control room. General Marcus Thorne, no relation to Eris, a fact that was a source of constant grim irony for my colleague, did not look happy. He had the face of a man who had been woken up at 3 a.m. and told the laws of physics had been cancelled. He stood before my console, his eyes scanning the dissipating storm on the monitor. "Dr. Hayes," he said, his voice like gravel, "you have some explaining to do." I stood up, my legs steadier than I expected them to be. I was no longer the scared boy from the science fair. I was the man who had harnessed a god and put it back in its box. "General," I said, my voice calm, "as you can see, the situation is under control. Project Chimera experienced an unforeseen amplification event. It was contained and neutralized. I have the full data log of the event right here. It will provide us with invaluable information for preventing such cascades in the future." I gestured to a neatly compiled data drive on my desk. I had spent the last 2 hours curating it, creating a perfect sanitized version of the truth. It was a masterpiece of plausible deniability. The general stared at me, his eyes searching my face for any sign of deception. "This amplification event caused millions of dollars in property damage and nearly killed a dozen storm chasers, one of whom, I'm told, is your brother." "Yes, sir," I said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "And if it weren't for the fail-safe protocols I designed and implemented, it would have wiped a town off the map and killed thousands. The system worked. It was messy, it was terrifying, but it worked. I saved those people, General. My work did. Vindication. It wasn't the broken apology from my brother. It was this. Standing in front of this powerful man, this embodiment of the system that had funded me but never understood me, and stating my value not as a plea but as a fact. I wasn't apologizing. I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I was taking credit for my victory, even if I had to lie about the nature of the war." The general was silent for a long time. He looked at the screen, then at me, then at the data drive. He knew he was being played. He had to know, but he had no proof. All he had was a national security nightmare that had magically vanished, and the man responsible for both the nightmare and the magic was standing right in front of him. I was too dangerous to punish, and too valuable to fire. "Get this data to a secure lab," he barked at one of the suits. "Dr. Hayes, you are confined to this facility until our investigation is complete. You will speak to no one. Is that understood?" "Perfectly, General," I said. As they left, Eris caught my eye from the doorway. He gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't approval, it was acknowledgement. He knew I had done something terrible, but he also knew I had done something brilliant. The conflict in his eyes was a mirror of the one in my own soul. The new reality for my family was far less ambiguous. Shane was rescued. A few hours later, he emerged from the cellar, covered in mud, to a crowd of reporters and emergency workers. He looked gaunt, haunted. The swaggering storm slayer was gone, replaced by a man who had stared into the abyss, and the abyss, he knew, had a name. My name. He gave a brief, rambling statement. He said he'd been reckless, that he was lucky to be alive, and that he was taking an indefinite break from storm chasing. He couldn't tell the truth. To do so would be to reveal the existence of Project Chimera, a secret he would be forced to keep by men like General Thorne. He was trapped in a prison of silence, his fame and reputation turning to ash in his mouth. His greatest story was one he could never tell. My father called me a dozen more times. I never answered. Their power over me, the power of guilt and obligation, was broken. They had leaned on me, their quiet, reliable foundation, for so long that they never realized I was the only thing holding up the roof. And when I finally shrugged, the whole house came down. The vindication wasn't in their punishment, it was in my freedom. The silence from my end was the new reality. They would have to learn to live in it. I sat alone in my control room, a prisoner in my own kingdom. The monitors were all back to normal, showing quiet, peaceful weather patterns across the country. It was over. I had built a monster to be seen, and in the end, I had become the monster to be free. And as I looked at the blank screens, I felt a strange and unsettling peace. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't joy. It was the quiet, profound, and terrifying calm that comes after the storm. My storm. So here I sit. It's been 6 months since the Oklahoma event. The official investigation concluded that my story was plausible. A freak accident, a heroic save. They called it the Hayes Cascade. I've been promoted. I'm no longer just a researcher. I now lead the entire atmospheric hazard mitigation division. They gave me a bigger office, more funding, and a team of scientists. They think they're rewarding a hero. In reality, they've just given the architect of the apocalypse the keys to a bigger castle. The irony is so thick, it's a physical weight. My relationship with my family is, well, it doesn't exist anymore. It's a crater, a void where a toxic structure used to stand. I hear things sometimes. My dad sold the house. It was too big for just him. He tried to call a few more times in the beginning, leaving long rambling voicemails that were a pathetic cocktail of pleading, anger, and confusion. I never listened to them all the way through. Eventually, they stopped. Shane completely disappeared from the public eye. His Storm Slayer brand collapsed overnight. His fans called him a coward for quitting. The few times he's been photographed, he looks older, smaller. The fire is gone from his eyes. He's just a man now, no longer a legend. I took that from him. Or maybe, I just forced him to see that the legend was built on a lie all along. We haven't spoken a single word since that day. There's nothing left to say. He knows what I did, and I know that he knows. It's a silent, permanent chasm between us. Was it worth it? That's the question, isn't it? The one you're probably asking yourself right now. Did I go too far? Am I the villain of this story? Maybe. I'm not sure I know the answer to that myself. I created a weapon of mass destruction, out of personal pride and deep-seated resentment. I terrorized my own brother, and held his life in my hands. I lied to my superiors, and put an entire state at risk. There's no moral calculus where that adds up to being the good guy. But then I think about a lifetime of being invisible. A lifetime of my contributions being dismissed, my passions mocked, my quiet competence taken for granted. We all have a breaking point. We all have a voice inside of us that wants to be heard. Most people just yell. I built a tornado. The real moral of the story, I think, isn't about revenge. It's about power. Not the loud, charismatic power that my brother chased, the kind that gets you fame and followers. It's about the quiet power, the power of knowledge, the power of competence, the power of being the one person in the room who actually knows how things work. For years I let them have their loud power, while my quiet power sat dormant. I thought it made me weak. I was wrong. Quiet power is the most dangerous kind, because nobody sees it coming. They underestimate you. They dismiss you. They call you a pencil pusher while you're designing the world around them. And when you finally decide to use that power, you don't just change the conversation, you change the weather, you change the whole map. So I ask you, what do you do when you're taken for granted? When your contributions are overlooked in favor of someone with more charisma, more swagger? Do you keep your head down and hope they'll notice you eventually? Do you swallow the quiet injustices day after day, year after year, until you forget what your own voice sounds like? Or do you build your storm? You don't have to level a county in Oklahoma. Your storm might be starting your own business. It might be setting a boundary you've never set before. It might be as simple and as terrifying as walking away from people who will never see your worth. It's about recognizing the power you hold and finally deciding to use it for yourself. My name is Evan Hayes. I'm a man who was pushed too far, and I pushed back with the force of a hurricane. I lost my family, and I carry the weight of what I did every single day. But I am no longer in anyone's shadow. I'm free, and some nights when the wind howls just right outside my window, I can't help but smile, because it sounds a little like my voice. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever felt like the quiet one in the room, like your work goes unnoticed, let me know in the comments below. I think you'd be surprised how many of us there are. And if you found yourself relating to this, maybe a little more than you're comfortable with, consider subscribing, because everyone has a storm inside them. It's just a matter of when you decide to let it out.